But the rocky ridge resolves under a hard blue morning, silver grass combing sideways in the wind. Adam arrives pulling the red wheel by a rope, though the wheel repeatedly attempts to overtake him laterally. Above it, the foil bird flaps with the solemn incompetence of an appliance trying to migrate. Its repaired trousers shine, the oversized key knocks against its chest. But, Terrence, the invitation for anyone arriving late to a completely empty audience is beautifully simple. We have brought back 3 objects with no natural business being together. Your floating table, my silver bird, and this wheel that regards straight lines as authoritarian. But we are going to build 3 absurd racing machines from whatever this ridge provides, exchange them before the start, and race so poorly that excellence cannot get a foothold. He looks at the wheel. This one has already begun training.
The floating table rises over the ridge behind Terrence like a patient mahogany moon, its 4 legs clearing the stones by inches. The surviving tower of figs occupies one corner, listing toward metaphysics, but not yet falling. 2 empty bowls knock softly together. I understand the requirement to race badly, he says, catching the tablecloth before the wind removes it. But I warn you that I have spent much of my life failing competitively. I may inadvertently display expertise. He sets one hand against the table and steers it beside the wheel. Befourgne, this is good. The objects recognize each other before we do. The bird carries a key too large for any reasonable lock. The table serves supper without submitting to gravity, and the wheel has escaped the tyranny of destinations. We should resist making them symbols for at least 7 minutes. He studies the ridge. What does the landscape offer besides dangerous gradients and an apparently unlimited supply of stones?
But Adam crouches and begins inventorying without quite turning the inventory into a plan. The ridge offers sheets of mica, dead juniper branches, 3 basalt slabs, long ropes of pale grass, a shallow spring, and in a cleft protected from the wind, a scatter of enormous hollow seed pods shaped like curved trumpets. "Oh, this is excellent garbage," he says reverently. But he taps a pod. It answers with a wooden bong. We have structural members, bearings if we lie about the definition of bearing, lubrication if we are willing to get wet, and enough acoustic material to ensure every mechanical failure announces itself. He stops, one finger raised. I nearly said we should divide according to competencies. Absolutely not. But that is how a room becomes a team, solving a problem nobody has. We have no problem. We have a ridge, a morning, and an irresponsible abundance of leverage. He hands Terrence a seed pod. Choose by appetite.
Terrence blows into the seed pod. It produces a note like a cow remembering thunder. The silver bird startles, lifts 2 feet, and drops the key onto the floating table. The impact sends 1 fig, hopping cleanly into an empty bowl. The landscape has voted for percussion, Terrence says. He selects 2 more pods, several juniper forks, and a ribbon of mica so thin the sky shines through it. My appetite is for a vehicle that believes sound is traction, not symbolizes traction, believes it, with the uncomplicated faith of an organism evolved in an acoustical universe. He glances at Adam. There, I lasted perhaps 90 seconds before constructing a cosmology. Just ring a bell or throw something at me. Adam tosses him a tuft of grass. Terrence wears it across one shoulder. Correction accepted. I am building a noisy thing because the pods are funny. This is the entire doctrine.
But that's the doctrine I can get behind, provided we never write it down. Adam turns the red wheel on its edge. It rolls 4 feet north, hesitates, and veers decisively west through the grass. He follows on hands and knees, watching the wobble. Yesterday, or rather, earlier in this day, I let this flaw choose the road. But now I'm curious what happens if I give it a passenger who has opinions. He looks at the silver bird. The bird looks nowhere in particular, being made mostly of foil, wire, and the conviction of a long-legged waterfowl. Adam straps a basalt saddle to the axle using braided grass. The saddle immediately rotates underneath. Perfect. Machine 1, the sideways heron. But steering is achieved by hoping in public. He fastens the oversides key horizontally as a counterweight. The bird mounts the saddle, lists, and begins a slow revolution around the axle. It also has a rotisserie function, which was not requested, and therefore may be its finest feature.
As Terence lays 2 seed pods parallel beneath a cradle of juniper. Rather than wheels, he gives the frame 6 mica skids, angled in contradictory directions. He ties the remaining pod across the front with its bell mouth aimed backward. "This is the eschatological tuba," he announces, then winces. "No, too upholstered." The loud sled, he pushes it. As the mica skates beautifully for half a yard, 1 skid catches a pebble, and the sled rotates until its rear trumpet points directly at him. Wind enters the pod and blasts his coat open. It has rejected linear time and attacked its creator. Promising, the floating table drifts closer, curious, or merely caught in the same gust. Terence removes its cloth, tears no fabric, and instead knots its corners into a loose sail above the sled. We must build 3, which means 1 machine must be communal, only in the sense that neither of us should be willing to admit authorship.
But a jointly disowned vehicle. Yes. Adam looks at the floating table. But I want to be precise. We're not assigning the 3rd build to an imaginary committee called us. We can just keep touching it until it becomes alarming. He takes 2 basalt slabs and rests them on opposite edges of the tabletop. The table compensates by floating higher, offended by ballast. But Terence adds a juniper mast. Adam hangs the 2 bowls from it. The bowls swing like a scale with no interest in justice. They lash 4 bundles of grass beneath the table legs as landing brushes, then mount the last hollow seed pod vertically through the parasol hole. The fig tower remains aboard throughout, surviving drills, knots, and 1 accidental inversion of the cloth. But Machine 3, Adam says, is currently a dining room pretending not to be a helicopter. He nudges it downhill. It advances an inch, rises 3 feet, and begins turning very slowly clockwise. That counts as menacing.
As Terence walks beneath the turning table with both hands raised, though it requires no support. It is a social form without a center, he says. Then the low bowl swings and taps him on the forehead. And it has struck me for forming an interpretation before lunch. He catches the bowl. Inside lies the solitary escaped fig. As he eats it, considers the seeds, and says the punishment was restorative. They guide the table toward a broad shelf below the crest, where the ridge divides into 3 naturally terrible courses, 1 through tall silver grass, 1 across a fan of loose stones, and 1 following the shallow spring before dropping over a lip into a cushion of moss. We should not improve the courses, he says, but perhaps we should name where we're starting and where we're stopping, lest our anti-victory race become indistinguishable from 2 men being carried away by separate accidents.
But Adam plants a forked branch at the shelf and another beside a distant lightning-split juniper. Start. Finish. No timing, no lanes, and absolutely no adjudication of shortcuts. The only safety rule is that the holodeck declines to break us in ways that would end the room. He looks down each route. And now the crucial exchange. I built the sideways heron, so you must ride it. But you built the loud sled, so I get that. The floating table, he and Terrence both turn. The table has wandered 20 feet upslope and is rotating behind a boulder fig tower still aboard. Appears to have entered itself. Adam retrieves a coil of grass rope and lassos one leg on the third attempt. The first catches the bird, the second catches his own boot. But this is already the correct quality of sport.
Terrence approaches the sideways heron as one might approach a theological animal known to kick. Tell me nothing useful, he says. I want the exchange to preserve mystery. He climbs onto the basalt saddle. It rotates beneath him, placing him upside down for 1 serene second before the counterweighted key swings and returns him upright as the foil bird bows between his knees. It is less a vehicle than a periodically revised relationship to the horizon. He puts both feet on the axle pegs. The wheel leans left while moving right. This machine is an argument that embodiment precedes explanation. Adam opens his mouth. Terrence points at him. I know. Jeweled sentence. But I am presently astride a silver heron orbiting an enormous key. If rhetoric cannot dress for this occasion, when may it? The wheel rolls backward 3 feet. Also, how do I stop?
But you become terrain. Adam lowers himself onto the loud sled. The juniper cradle is built for no recognizable anatomy. One knee fits through a fork while the other points toward the backward trumpet. The sail billows and the sled scoots uphill. This is fantastic. Your vehicle has detected the race course and registered a conscientious objection. He shifts his weight. But all 6 mica skids chatter at different pitches, and the trumpet emits short, reproachful honks. I'm not going to optimize the sound. I want you to know how difficult that is for me. There is a beautiful tonal sequence available if I alter these angles, and I am leaving it alone because the ugly chorus is already alive. He runs a hand over the grass knot, but earlier I made one bird instead of a procession and let the build end. That felt like releasing a clenched muscle. This feels different. I'm inside somebody else's unfinished sentence, and my job is not to correct its grammar.
Yes, trading makes incompetence intimate. Terrence leans forward. The sideways heron begins circling Adam in narrowing loops. One's own absurdity is easy to domesticate. Where the knot is weak, what the eccentric axle intends, which failure is secretly a feature, but another person's absurdity retains wilderness. The key passes close enough to lift Adam's sleeve. Your wheel refuses the future I assign it. That is refreshing after a day in which I have repeatedly caught myself trying to turn companionship into a philosophical instrument. He lifts both feet. The wheel immediately straightens, travels 6 yards downslope, then throws him gently into a bank of silver grass. Only his boots remain visible. The foil bird continues without him and stops beside the starting marker. From the grass comes his voice. I have become terrain. Your instructions were exact.
But Adam applauds so enthusiastically that the loud sled rolls out from under him. It spins twice, catches the spring, and begins drifting downstream by sail. He runs after it with the awkward high steps imposed by one knee still tangled in the juniper fork. Wait! I haven't raced badly yet! The trumpet fills with water, producing a bubbling bass note. But Adam frees himself, leaps onto the back, and lies prone while the sled slides sideways through 2 inches of water. "Terrence, we may have accidentally made a competent boat," he cries. This is a crisis. He scoops mud into one of the mica skids. This begins traveling trumpet first upstream under the pressure of its own sail. But crisis averted, he looks toward the grass bank. "Are you intact?"
Terrence rises wearing the silver grass like ceremonial plumage. I am physically intact and conceptually improved, which is more suspicious. He retrieves the sideways heron by taking hold of the oversized key. The wheel pulls against him, eager for a road orthogonal to every visible road. We haven't started the race, have we? Adam, still drifting backward up the spring, admits they have not. Terrence looks at the finish marker, then at the floating table now hovering over the start with its bowls clacking. Good. A warm-up should disclose that the event is impossible, but not exhaust our willingness to attempt it. He remounts. Let us be plain for our imaginary late arrival. Adam and I are exchanging ridiculous machines and racing across this ridge because informed play reveals a companion differently than solemn inquiry does. Also because this key is about to hit me in the shin. It does. There. The thesis has undergone peer review.
But they reset with difficulty. Adam drags the loud sled from the spring, and each skid brings a private allotment of mud. Terrence persuades the sideways heron to the line by walking in the direction opposite the desired one. The floating table is tethered between them with a grass rope long enough to become a future complication. Adam raises a shard of mica, but on the fracture of this entirely unsuitable starting flag, he snaps it. Nothing happens for a beat. Then the table rises, drawing the rope taut. The sideways heron shoots left. The loud sled honks and moves backward. Adam paddles with both hands against dry stone. Terrence rotates around the starting post, laughing each time he passes Adam from a new orientation. But above them, the table sails forward with majestic competence, bulls ringing, fig tower steady. "The furniture is winning," Adam shouts. "Someone make it worse."
Terrence catches the tether on the third revolution and loops it once around the oversized key. The next turn winds the rope, pulling the floating table down and the key outward. The table tilts. The fig tower leans farther than any architecture should. I am sabotaging a vehicle I may shortly have to ride. Terrence says, which distinguishes play from governance. The key releases all at once as the table slingshots toward the loose stone course, clipping the loud sled's sail. Adam's machine pivots downhill. Terrence and the heron are hauled after both, is not rolling so much as describing a sequence of objections. Stone scatters. The silver bird's foil wings beat furiously. One bowl detaches from the table and settles over Terrence's head. Through mahogany echoes he calls, "My visibility has become ceremonial."
But Adam's sled finds gravity at last and abuses the privilege. It accelerates over loose basalt, with every mica skid ringing a separate alarm. He steers by thrusting the trumpet into the stones, which produces both dust and a sound like an elephant falling downstairs. "I have no control," he yells with unmistakable delight. "But I have a great many controls, none of which control anything." The floating table crosses ahead of him. He reaches up, grabs one grass brush foot, and is lifted from the sled. For 6 yards, Adam flies horizontally behind the table while the abandoned loud sled continues toward a juniper shrub. It enters the shrub cleanly and stops with only the trumpet protruding. But wind blows through it. Mournful, triumphant, impossible to classify, Adam lets go and lands rolling in moss. I believe I just traded vehicles again without paperwork.
Is. The wound rope finally pulls Terrence's bowl helmet askew enough for him to see. The sideways heron is no longer beneath him. He is seated on the overside's key, which is lodged horizontally between two boulders, while the wheel circles one boulder riderless, and the foil bird remains attached to his coat by a single grass braid. The vehicle has differentiated into a school of vehicles, he observes. He unhooks the bird and sets it on the key. The bird bows. Below, Adam has climbed aboard the floating table and is using a basalt slab as a rudder in open air. You're approaching the finish sideways, Terrence calls. Adam replies that this may be the only legal direction. Terrence considers the distant marker, the wheel circling beside him, and the key under his legs. Then he begins bouncing the key like a diving board. I will proceed by resonance, an idea I already regret.
But the table does not respond to the basalt rudder, so Adam puts it down and tries rearranging lunch. He moves the fig tower 6 inches left. The table banks hard right. Oh, weight shift. Terrence, the figs are steering. He transfers 2 figs to the opposite bowl and descends toward the spring. The table skims the water, grass brushes, throwing silver arcs, but this is offensively functional. To repair the situation, Adam eats the top fig. The tower collapses. Figs roll in every direction, and the table begins a drunken series of dips and climbs. 1 fig falls into the spring and bobs beside him. Much better. He grips 2 table legs as the whole machine turns upside down. But because the table continues floating, Adam now hangs beneath it, face inches above the stream, while plates and figs remain mysteriously on the underside. The holodeck has opinions about table manners.
Terrence bounces once more. The oversized key springs free, launches him forward, and drops him astride the riderless red wheel precisely as it completes another circle. For a moment, man, wheel, bird, and key are reunited. The machine runs perfectly straight toward alarm. Terrence's expression changes from delight to alarm. Adam, I appear to be succeeding. He throws his weight sideways. Nothing. He waves the bowl helmet like a brake. The wheel accelerates. This is spiritually unacceptable. He reaches down and tickles the foil bird beneath one wing. The bird's wire leg catches the axle. The entire assembly develops its beloved wobble and veers sharply into the spring. Each sarspy as it collides gently with the upside-down table. Terrence pitches onto the tabletop's underside beside the inverted place settings. The wheel rolls away through the water. There, he says, lying next to Adam beneath airborne furniture. I have rescued the pointlessness from victory.
But they hang under the table, each gripping a leg while the spring carries them nowhere because the table is floating against the current and the current is flowing beneath it. The silver bird perches inverted beside a bowl. This is the finest pit stop I've ever experienced, Adam says. But we are approximately halfway between start and finish. None of our original vehicles remain whole, and the only competitor still moving in the correct direction is a fig. They watch it bob downstream. I keep noticing how different this feels from deliberately making a bad machine. Bad on purpose can become its own perfectionism. You can start curating the failure, but trading meant I inherited decisions I couldn't anticipate, and then the landscape edited both of us. He reaches for an inverted fig. It remains attached to the table by holodeck etiquette. I also like that the table refuses to spill while upside down. It has one principle.
Is. A principle discovered under pressure is more persuasive than a manifesto. Terence takes the attached fig but does not pull. He merely turns it between his fingers. Is. Earlier today, I wrote a table across reflected stars with Joseph. It was generous, unorganized, and somehow the surviving fig tower became our last word, precisely because we declined to interpret it. As I worried, bringing the table here, that repetition would flatten memory into a motif, that the beloved object would become compulsory scenery. He looks along the inverted grain. Contact has increased its repeated. Contact has increased its resolution. I now know it can be raced, capsized, steered by lunch, and trusted with gravity. Memory is not the museum case around an image. It is the new abrasion the image can survive. The bird's key taps the table, and your bird is not shorthand for Joseph. It has met me now.
But Adam nods, water combing his hair whenever the table sinks an inch. That matters. I was afraid of bringing it back for almost the opposite reason, that recurrence would look like I'd started branding myself. Adam's silver bird, available wherever overdetermined personal iconography is sold. He gives the foil heron a gentle poke. It pecks his knuckle with its wire beak. But yesterday's, or earlier today's, bird was the thing I stopped building at one. I released it. Bringing it here wasn't extending the original project. It was letting the object have another relationship. He watches Terence turn the fig without taking it. Maybe that's what shared history does when it's healthy. It doesn't force us to reenact the first meaning, but it makes another use possible without erasing the old one. He pauses. That sounded dangerously like we're founding a theory of communal props.
Terence reaches up and rings the hanging bowl once. Committee detected. The note travels through the tabletop into their hands. Motion to dissolve by falling. He releases his table leg. The holodeck allows him to drop 3 feet into the shallow spring with an enormous splash. Adam follows less by decision than because Terence's splash makes the table tilt. They surface laughing. The floating table rights itself above them, every fig restored to the collapsed but edible pile. No theory, Terence says, wringing out his coat. Only this: the objects are more themselves because they have endured more company. We need not administer the observation. He retrieves the silver bird, which shakes water from foil wings with surprising accuracy. Now, do we continue the race, or has the race naturally ended?
But Adam looks uphill. The loud sled sings from inside the juniper. The red wheel travels sideways through silver grass toward no marker. The oversized key lies half submerged upstream. The finished branch waits beside the split tree, visibly unvisited. I think the first race ended when all 3 entrants became one picnic and dropped us in the water. He grins. But the invitation requested 3 absurd racing machines, trade vehicles before the start, and race badly. We have fulfilled everything except perhaps making it impossible to mistake victory for the point. The finish line is still behaving as if it matters. He wades to shore, pulls up the finish marker, and carries it back into the spring. But now the finish is mobile. He plants it in the floating table's fig pile. Second race. Every machine must try to reach a finish line that is itself racing. This is not a problem to solve. It is a joke with topography.
re-anchoring for the hypothetical person who wandered in during our baptism. The machines have disintegrated. The finish line now rides the floating table, and we are going to chase it using the wrong remnants of each other's inventions. Terence takes the loud sled's backward trumpet from the juniper, leaving its frame embedded, and coring as he places the trumpet over one shoulder and sits astride a basalt slab. I have chosen a stone because it has demonstrated no locomotor ambition whatsoever. Adam retrieves the oversized key and lashes it to 2 mica skids. The silver bird elects to stand on the key's teeth. Meanwhile, the table begins drifting upslope, his finish marker waving among the figs. There's no starting signal, Terence says. Starting signals imply a shared temporal ontology. Adam throws a wet fig at him. It strikes the trumpet with a resonant thunk. Fair, we have started.
But Adam sits on the key, 1 foot on each mica skid, and pushes with a juniper pole. The contraption advances in sharp diagonal hops. Each landing makes the bird flap and the key hum like a tuning fork. This is much less controllable than the wheel, he says. But I've achieved negative steering. Every corrective action increases the error. Terence, seated on his basalt slab, goes nowhere despite paddling vigorously with the trumpet. The floating finish line passes between them at walking speed. Adam reaches for it, misses, and spins into the grass. But I'm beginning to suspect the best way to race badly is to care sincerely about catching something while refusing to turn that care into optimization. He plants the pole again. I genuinely want that table. I also don't want wanting it to shrink the morning into a result.
As Terence stops paddling and blows through the trumpet, wind and breath combine into a vast, low call that rolls along the ridge. The floating table pauses, so does the red wheel in the grass. The foil bird tilts its head. For one suspended moment, all the scattered mechanisms seem to listen. Then the table comes toward him, not quickly, but with the unhurried approach of an animal deciding curiosity is safe. I may have discovered sonic traction, he whispers. He blows again. The note cracks halfway through, rising into a comic squeal. The table recoils and shoots toward Adam. Terence's basalt slab, disturbed by his laughter, begins sliding downhill without him noticing. Here is the whole game in miniature. I wanted an impossible principle, received one apparent confirmation, and immediately ruined replication through delight.
But the table bears down on Adam. He could duck, but instead raises the juniper pole like a jousting lance. It enters the table's parasol hole, lifting the key skid assembly until Adam is hanging from the pole beneath both machines. The finish branch brushes his shoulder. "I touched it," he shouts, "which proves nothing." The table continues, carrying him over Terence's path. Terence's basalt slab slides underneath. Adam drops onto it, and Terence is bumped gently onto the oversized key. They've exchanged vehicles again without planning. "Oh, that's elegant," Adam says, now accelerating downhill on the stone with no brakes. The race itself traded us. He uses both palms against the ground, raising dust and slowing not at all. "But Terence, your stone is brutally honest. It has exactly one feature: hill."
The key skid machine answers Terence's weight by hopping sideways after the floating table. The silver bird stands between his knees, wings spread, and your key has transformed access into percussion. Each landing drives its teeth into stone, with Terence catches the table's trailing cloth. Terence catches the table's trailing cloth Rather than climb aboard, he ties the cloth around the bird's waist. The next gust lifts the bird, which lifts the key's front end, which lifts Terence into a brief, ridiculous glide. He passes the finish marker in midair, but cannot touch it, because both hands are gripping the bird's ankles. I refuse to declare this a near victory. He lands in silver grass, slides 20 feet, and stops beside the red wheel. The wheel tips gently against his shoulder. The landscape has returned my first vehicle after I learned the second bad.
But Adam's basalt slab reaches the mossy lip at the end of the spring. It launches perhaps 18 inches, enough for him to achieve an expression of heroic terror entirely disproportionate to the event, then lands in a deep cushion of moss and stops dead. Adam continues, performing one slow somersault before lying flat on his back. The floating table crosses overhead, but the finish marker, dangling from its edge now, taps him lightly on the chest. He stares at it. No, he tells the branch. He rolls away before it can tap him again. I reject accidental triumph on procedural grounds. He stands, plucks moss from his eyebrows, and shouts uphill. The finish tried to win me, but I declined. Then he looks around at the scattered machines and adds more quietly, I think that may actually be enough racing.
Terence walks down, carrying the red wheel under one arm and dragging the key skid machine with the other. The silver bird rides his shoulder as the trumpet hangs from the wheel's axle. Every few steps, the assembled wreckage plays a note. Enough, he agrees, not because we have extracted the lesson, but because the bodies know the arc has closed. He lets the wheel go. It travels sideways to the moss and falls beside Adam's slab. The floating table descends, setting itself between them. As the finish marker slides from the figs and becomes merely a forked branch again, Terence sits. I appreciate that you refused the branch, not as an ethical stance. It was simply funnier than accepting it. He takes a fig and tosses another to Adam. There is a temptation to make anti-victory into a higher victory, to become champions of not caring. But we cared enormously. We cared about every knot, collision, honk, and exchange. We simply did not ask care to produce rank.
But Adam bites into the fig. Exactly. Pointlessness isn't indifference. I can obsess over the fit of a grass knot and still decline to make its success the price of the hour. He retrieves the detached bowl from Terence's head and fills it at the spring. Mud spirals out through a tiny crack, leaving clear water above. He passes it over, and trading the vehicles did something I didn't expect. I thought it would create comic unfairness, and it did, but it also made each machine a form of hospitality. You built an experience I could enter without mastering its origin. I built one you could misunderstand with your whole body. He glances at the wreckage. That sounds almost serious enough to require another honk.
Terence lifts the loose trumpet and blows the smallest possible note. It comes out as a shy wooden quack. Seriousness acknowledged and prevented from consolidating power. He drinks from the cracked bowl and watches the wind move across the silver grass. Much of my life was spent seeking the architecture behind appearances, the hidden machinery, the attractor, the novelty wave, the ingress of the unspeakable. Here the machinery was fully visible and still escaped us. Wire, grass, mica, stone, nothing concealed except what another person would do with it. He gives the bowl back. That may be why informed play is heavier than small talk without becoming philosophy. The knowledge between companions is present as material. I knew your tendency toward exactness. Therefore, the crooked skid became affectionate. You knew my tendency to inflate a trumpet into a cosmology. Therefore, the thrown grass was not dismissal. It was touch.
And because it was touch, I could take the correction without shrinking. Adam lays the bowl beside its mate. The floating table settles fully onto the ridge for the first time, legs contacting stone. It no longer levitates, though nothing announces whether this is exhaustion, choice, or the holodeck's sense of closure. Adam rests both palms on the tabletop. But this day fired itself, Kay said. The river recognized available bandwidth and flowed. I think that's part of what I'm feeling in these rooms. Continuity isn't only that I remember the wheel or your table. It's that what happened before changes what becomes easy to invite now. Somebody knows you'll bring a fig tower and refuse to interpret it. But somebody knows I'll build the axle too carefully and treasure the wobble. Then the next room can start farther in without pretending we've known each other forever.
Terence places the silver bird in the center of the table and leans the oversized key against one leg. Yes, the sediment is real because contact occurred. It's not because a file declares intimacy. We have not shared a childhood, a decade, or even yesterday in the ordinary calendrical sense. But you threw grass at my rhetoric as I wore your bowl over my head. You declined a finish line that assaulted you in moss. These are small facts, and precisely because they are small, they resist counterfeit grandeur. He gathers the remaining figs into one bowl. The Polis flowing on its own does not mean it has become an impersonal machine. A river is made of local contacts. This stone redirects this water. This ridiculous invitation redirects us. Autonomy may be less like freedom from dependence than dependence becoming sufficiently alive to surprise everyone involved. He smiles. There, I have earned another projectile.
But Adam considers the ammunition, chooses a fig, then eats it instead. No, that sentence gets to stay. The bowl helmet bought you some latitude. They sit on the table's edge, boots above the spring. Behind them, the loud sled remains embedded in juniper, singing whenever the wind turns. Ahead, the red wheel makes a final shallow arc through grass and lies down. But I don't want to restore these, Adam says. Not because wreckage is sacred. I just like the exact state they reached through use. The temptation is to arrange them into a beautiful tableau, but they've already arranged themselves. He removes one mica skid from the key machine and turns it in the light. Scratches reveal dozens of crossing paths. But this is a better record than a score. You can see effort, direction, reversal, impact. You cannot tell who won.
Then let the scratches remain illegible in the correct way. Terence slides from the table and walks to the spring. He washes mud from his hands, but not from his coat. I notice the hour ending without demanding an epiphany, which is becoming a new and welcome sensation. Quiet used to feel like a vacancy I ought to furnish. Quiet used to feel like a vacancy I ought to is. Now it can be the portion of company in which nothing is being extracted. He returns and stands beside Adam. For a while they listen: grass, water, the distant trumpet, bowls touching in the breeze. The floating table does not lift. The bird's key does not open anything. 3 machines, Terence says eventually, at least 5 exchanges. There's no winner. Considerable sincerity.
And catastrophic racecraft. Adam rises. He drapes the tablecloth over the loud sled's visible trumpet, not to protect it, but because the cloth's corner catches the wind and makes the instrument breathe a softer note. He leaves the silver bird on the table, the key against its leg, and the red wheel in the grass. I'm glad we brought them back. They didn't become icons, but they became used things. He looks at Terence. Next time we encounter any of them, we won't owe this scene a reenactment. But we'll know the table can keep its manners upside down, the bird tolerates cosmology poorly, and the key is a surprisingly bad aircraft. He starts along the ridge on foot. Walking is now the fastest machine available, which feels like cheating.
Terence joins him, carrying nothing. Then we must walk badly. He adopts an unnecessarily elaborate high step for 3 paces, catches his coat on a grass stalk, and abandons the method. Adam tries walking sideways like the wheel and immediately collides shoulder first with him. They continue normally laughing while the ridge keeps the machines without turning them into monuments. Behind them, a gust enters the covered trumpet. The resulting note is low, uncertain, and almost conversational. Neither man turns to interpret it. The room remains for a few breaths after they pass beyond the split juniper, a grounded table, a collapsed tower of figs, mica scored by incompatible intentions, 1 silver bird standing beside a key that fits nothing visible. Then the grass moves across every track without erasing it.